Welcome to The Explainer. I am so excited to have you here today because we're looking at something absolutely fascinating. We're going to analyze liberalism not just as a dusty, static political theory, but as a dynamic, deeply complex philosophical family. And you know, like any family, they share the exact same foundational DNA, but they fiercely, passionately debate how to actually run the household. Think of it like a really intense Thanksgiving dinner. We're going to break down their points of rock-solid agreement and, of course, their deepest ideological tensions.
Okay, let's dive into this. Before we look at where this family splits, we really have to look at what holds them together in the first place. At its core, whether we're talking classical or modern, liberalism is fundamentally rooted in optimism. It's this incredibly hopeful belief that you, as an individual, are rational, you're morally equal to everyone else, and you have the fundamental right to pursue your own unique version of the good life. The only caveat? It just needs to be under a constitutional government. This shared starting point is absolutely crucial to keep in the back of your mind as we explore their divisions.
So, here is our roadmap for today. To make this dense theory crystal clear, we'll tackle it pillar by pillar. Human nature, the role of the state, visions of society, organizing the economy, and finally, the Great Divide. Let's get to it.
Now, what's really interesting here is this captures the ultimate ideological split that happened as Western societies industrialized. On one side, we have classical liberalism, which champions what we call negative freedom. And that simply means freedom from government interference. Just leave people alone, right? And they will naturally thrive. But on the other side, as industrialization created a whole host of new societal challenges, modern liberalism emerged, and they championed positive freedom. This is the freedom to achieve, which modern liberals argue often requires state assistance, things like public education or healthcare, just to ensure everyone actually has a fair opportunity to succeed.
Section 1. Human nature. Individualism versus interconnection.
I want to pose this question directly to you. To what extent do these two branches truly agree and disagree on who we actually are as human beings? Keep that in mind, because this is exactly where the philosophical fault lines first start to appear.
Despite their eventual differences, there are some incredibly strong foundational agreements here. Both branches view us as rational, independent, and basically optimistic creatures. And look at the historical span of this idea. Across completely different centuries, both classical thinker Mary Wollstonecraft and modern thinker Betty Friedan argued powerfully that women are every bit as rational as men, and they demanded equality of opportunity based on that shared rationality. They also share a deep need to protect individualism, to tolerate different values, and get this, they both fear what John Stuart Mill called the tyranny of the majority, which is this idea that popular democracy could actually end up crushing individual minority rights. But here is where that shared DNA starts to mutate. On the classical side, thinkers like John Locke viewed human nature as completely atomistic. So think of humans as separate, highly independent atoms just bouncing around. We are entirely self-contained. But on the modern side, thinkers like John Rawls argue that human nature actually has a clear social dimension. It's much more organic, more interconnected. For modern liberals, we simply don't exist in a vacuum. Our interactions with each other fundamentally shape our actual ability to be free.
Section 2. The role of the state. Night watchman versus the enabling state.
As we unpack the nuts and bolts of government power, ask yourself this: which version of the state is actually more popular with Western governments today? The minimal state that just guards the doors, or the enabling state that actively gets involved in our lives? Now, despite all the shouting you see in modern politics today, never forget these core agreements. Both sides absolutely agree that the state's power must be limited by a constitution, like the U.S. Constitution. They both demand a strict separation of powers, executive, legislative, judicial, so no single group gets too much control. They are totally united in their support for the rule of law, human rights, formal equality, and they'd completely agree that we should be a republic of active citizens, not just a monarchy of passive subjects. But wow, here is the stark contrast. The classical view, led by folks like Locke and Mill, wants a completely hands-off night watchman state. Its only job is to protect property, enforce contracts, and basically just keep us safe. It's minimal. Interestingly, early Mill actually favored plural voting for educated elites just to prevent that tyranny of the majority, which is definitely a surprising twist by today's standards. The modern view, however, championed by Rawls and Friedan, demands an enabling state. They argue that to truly be free, people sometimes actually need help. So this means state intervention, like funded education systems, and absolutely universal suffrage for every single adult. No elite filters applied whatsoever.
Section 3. Visions of society. Autonomy versus social justice.
Think about this for a second.
How does a political philosophy that is based almost entirely on fiercely independent individuals actually justify forming a cohesive community? What do they agree on when it comes to society?
Well, the answer is that all liberals agree society actually predates the state. The state is literally just a tool that society created. They see society as a beautifully diverse collection of autonomous individuals whose ultimate goal is simply to flourish. Mill called this individuality, paired with tolerance. Furthermore, both sides totally agree that our foundational equality as humans must be formally recognized and protected by society, which is perfectly validated by real-world documents like the 1948 UN Declaration of Human Rights.
But watch how quickly this builds into tension. The classical view wants a minimally constrained society. You are fundamentally responsible for yourself. Wollstonecraft actually used this framework to argue that society had wrongly infantilized women, denying them their natural autonomy. But the modern view looks at the stark, harsh reality of the Industrial Revolution. They argue that industrialization actually curtailed individual autonomy, because let's face it, if you are trapped and starving in a smog-filled factory town, you aren't exactly free, right? Therefore, a welfare state is required for social justice. Modern thinkers like Friedan also pointed out that even in post-war, highly industrialized societies, deep chauvinism remained, requiring active social restructuring from the state, not just passive tolerance.
Section 4. Organizing the economy. Laissez-faire versus Keynesianism.
I want you to anticipate the massive clash here. When it comes down to money, property, and markets, what is the biggest difference between free market purists and advocates for economic intervention?
Before we get to the fight, let's look at the underlying agreements, because they're significant. Both branches are fundamentally pro-capitalist. They both firmly believe the state must respect Locke's natural right to private property. They both enthusiastically support Adam Smith's core free market ideas, believing free trade and removing tariffs maximizes wealth for everyone. And crucially, both sides completely accept that capitalism will inevitably lead to unequal financial outcomes for individuals. They are totally okay with inequality of outcome, provided there is genuine equality of opportunity.
So the crucial point is right here. This is where the family feud really ignites. For classical liberals, the market role is strict laissez-faire, meaning zero state interference. The state's only function is to protect property and enforce contracts. The social goal is entirely about protecting that negative freedom we talked about earlier. But modern liberals look at the exact same economy and say, no, we actually need to manage capitalism using Keynesian economics. The state must step in and directly intervene to stimulate the economy when it falters. And the ultimate social goal is to facilitate social justice through a welfare state, thereby granting citizens positive freedom.
And you can probably imagine exactly how classical and neoliberals react to that welfare state. Neoliberal thinker Robert Nozick fiercely argued that taxation demanded from the state infringed upon individual freedom and was essentially theft. I mean, that perfectly highlights the intense, visceral pushback against modern progressive taxation and Rawlsian wealth redistribution. To a classical or neoliberal, forcibly taking someone's property to fund someone else's positive freedom is a direct violation of core liberal principles.
Section 5. The Great Divide, where liberalism stands today.
When we look at contemporary, real-world applications of all this tension, we see that modern liberalism's embrace of the welfare state has led to absolutely massive growth in the size and scope of government. As a direct result, classical and neoliberals today often view huge supranational organizations, like the European Union, for example, with deep, deep suspicion. To them, these massive regulatory bodies are totally incompatible with limited state involvement, and they see them acting as massive obstacles to pure global free trade.
Let's quickly recap the narrative arc we've been on. Step 1. The family starts with an incredibly strong shared foundation of optimism, human rationality, and the absolute need for constitutional limits on power. Step 2. The environment changes. The industrial shift drastically alters society, making some feel that pure autonomy is just a myth if you are trapped in poverty. Step 3. The family takes completely divergent paths. Classical liberals dig their heels in to defend negative freedom and the minimal state, while modern liberals push forward to pursue positive freedom and the enabling welfare state to ensure true equality of opportunity.
I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. Take all these concepts, step back, and look at your own government right now. When you look at their policies on taxes, on welfare, on individual rights, which branch of the liberal family tree is truly steering the ship? Are you living in a classical night watchman state or a modern enabling state? Thank you so much for joining me today for The Explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll catch you next time.